Yoroshiku, friend SB here. It's time to talk about the bird.
Bird up!
Strike Hawks released a bit into the season, a strike counterpart to the original Rapid character. How do we feel about this one? I've seen some opinions out there on the design, so let me tell you about my thoughts. The original Rapid character was very much like high maneuvering, keeping some good spacing, going in for swoops, and of course, big annoying combos. A major problem character when he first released, and I can tell that they did not want a repeat of that same situation. So Strike Hawks, despite being a strike character, just does not have the same firepower that the original had. In this video, I will be structuring it in terms of the good, the bad, and the potential. So starting off with the good, the thing that stands out to me the most is the amount of synergy that this character has throughout all of his skills. Special action was very much a very prominent part of the original character, and the synergy is still there. Getting into good positioning is very important. You can go in, go for a quick swoop, and once you've closed the gap, you can combo into whatever you like. The combos are fun, I really enjoy them. Every single skill can work in some way with each other. So the alpha typically is either going to be a tap alpha finisher or a charge alpha starter, which you can do into beta, you can do into gamma, and you can do other things, I guess. Beta, again, you can combo into other moves, like beta into beta. You can do beta into gamma. And of course, you can finish off everything with an alpha. Gamma, of course, also combos. You can do fun things to the gamma like this, where you can play with the down power, so you can get a second beta off. So overall, his combo game is super fun. And I think one of the most notable things about him is to do with level scaling. When I get his skills to level 7, they have additional effects. So Charge Alpha goes from 1 tornado into 3 tornadoes. Look at this. Which of course has lots of down power. With Beta, you will gain armor. And with Gamma, there's sort of two effects here. First of all, not only do you get a big burst of damage right at the end, but it also gives the reveal effect, which also mirrors Rapid Hawks being able to do the same thing with his Gamma. There's a bigger discussion that we can have here regarding how level scaling works, and I'll get into that later. One of the things that you might notice about his alpha is that there's a difference from when you hit someone with shield and when you hit them without shield. So with shield, it's just a very simple hit effect, but when you hit them on flesh, it applies a stagger. And without talking about the actual effectiveness of the stagger, I just really want to point out that there is a distinction between a shielded and non-shielded hit. I just think that's interesting, because we don't really see that on other characters, and when there's new sorts of interactions like this, I think it needs pointing out. Maybe they did it like that because they're trying out new things, who's to say, but it's something of note, and I like it when they try new things. There might be something like that that exists already, I don't know, but this is a bit more obvious at least. Speaking of distinctions, if I fire a charge alpha at someone, it will not always do the knockback if I only hit 2 hits, but if I'm able to hit 3 hits, it does apply the knockback. Again, this is just a very specific interaction, and I appreciate the distinction. So if I were to fire 2 off, the knockback will then apply on the 3rd hit, even if it was on a different tornado. Very interesting stuff. And the final thing I want to point out is that we see a common trend in this game where attacks will have tracking to them. And this character does not have a lot of tracking effects. For any other character, such as this Deku that released earlier this season, you would expect that Beta will have some sort of tracking effect, as it does here. But in the case of Hawks, not so. There was absolutely no turn there. There's a bit of a hitbox to it, but it's quite simple to just completely miss. And as a big hater of tracking, I really appreciate this. There is some tracking on the Gamma, but it's like I don't know if it's the perfect amount of tracking, but it's not too unreasonable. Too unreasonable would be like tracking from here. I mean, he tried. So interesting character so far. I really do like him a lot, and because I managed to roll for him, I've even played him a little bit. Fun character, do enjoy. But of course, we're gonna critique some things! And there is one very obvious flaw in this character's implementation, which is to do with beta. As discussed earlier, when you hit someone with beta and it's level 7, it has a armor effect to it. So when someone gets hit by grab, such as with derbies, and they press beta, it knocks them out of it, and they think, oh wow, it must be because of that armor effect to it. Well, not only does that not make sense, but if I also set myself to level 1 beta and I get grabbed, you will see that it works regardless. Because it has nothing to do with armor, and it has nothing to do with grabs. It is any hit stun. It could be a melee combo. Although because melee combos have multiple hits, it is likely that you'll still get knocked out of it if you don't have the armor effect. In this instance, the armor does actually make it a bit more broken. It is also just a very powerful tool that allows you to break free of any situation. If you want more details as to how this works, I'll get a bit technical with you now. Every single action in the game, so alpha, beta, gamma, special action, I guess melee attacks also apply, they all have similar properties that is all inherited from Big Daddy action, otherwise known as a parent class or a super class. But basically, a lot of functionality exists in this parent class. So anything that is implemented in the parent class is shared by all other actions that inherit from it. When Overhaul released, they had to add a new functionality, which would allow you to perform an action while in hit stun so that he could use it for his special action. And when Overhaul released, there was a bug that allowed him to do it on his gamma as well, and a lot of people said, that's not a bug, it must be intentional, which was stupid at the time. And so when it happened for Hawks, I thought, there's no way people would think this was intentional as well. Unbelievably, I've seen some people saying that this was probably intentional. No, it isn't. People that don't know anything about game development, no it isn't. It's just a property in that parent class that could apply to literally any action in the game. In fact, behold as I use a mod to apply that to a completely different character. Eat my ass. And I can also use a mod to fix the bug. So this being a variation moveset, it of course has many properties that is shared from the original moveset, and I'm critical of them here as well. First of all, don't like this melee string, because 1, it is very floaty, and 2, it has so much movement. I don't like that it has so much movement to it. Really dumb. When they nerfed Hawks' combo that didn't allow him to cancel a melee action into like beta, I didn't necessarily think that was the way to do it. It was just sort of an easy fix to the situation, when it would have been better just to change the way that this melee attack works. The whole thing, I just don't like it. At least we don't have any of those shenanigans here as well, right? I mean, there is some exploit / tech that you can do with like specific timing of a melee attack. That needs to be fixed as well, but I digress. The other thing that is shared is of course the special action. And what I don't really like about this special action is to do with the relationship between the speed and the ammo. I think it goes far too fast. I think the ammo is far too little. If the character was slower in the air and so less ammo was spent, that would be a good in-between area. Especially considering he has a speed up button. Like, they could have just made that, more useful. Burst speed in this game is a little bit broken. Here's a completely different character, all for one. He also has a flight special action, but I actually like the speed and ammo consumption of this one. This is better. Give this to Hawks and we're good. And there are other reasons as to why high burst speed is really bad. One of those reasons is because you can preserve the momentum using skills like Gamma. And there's also some weird physics stuff you can do with Alpha as well to preserve that even longer. Like, have a look at this. Take flight, speed up, start mashing Alpha. I'm going really far, really fast. I barely even used any special action ammo. And also, because it's so fast, you can't really synergize with parts of his kit like Gamma. Because if you're going this fast and you try to hit someone with Gamma, you'll just kind of fly right through them. And of course with the Alpha. As discussed, it's quite abusable while moving, but I also don't really like how this feels mechanically as well. In the rapid version, you could use Alpha while flying. And this makes sense contextually. And you could try doing something very similar with the strike version. Of course, he uses his wings to do the attack, so it doesn't make sense that he can fly at the same time. So the general concept of fly, fire, and alpha continue flying is fine. You can't abuse it as much because starting your flight does cost a bit of ammo, but it feels very awkward. And one of the reasons for that is because of the animation being so long for alpha, you're going to lose some altitude before you can continue flying. I just think this alpha is quite slow, and I have other complaints about it as well. If the tornado is in the air, it flies quite fast, it has a quite tall hitbox, but if it's on the ground, it goes quite slow. The entity kind of changes. And when you're firing at someone, it's a bit awkward because if it just touches the ground, you lose a lot of speed very suddenly. This also applies to charge alpha. I just don't really like this design because, again, as I say, you can accidentally have an effect that you don't really want. So control-wise, it's a bit awkward, and aiming is also awkward as a result of the camera that Hawks has. I have some beef with the camera in this game, if you don't know. When Rapid Hawks released, it made some sense to have the camera this way. One being that his feathers are just ginormous, and two, because his projectile fires in such a fashion that it's a bit sensible. It makes some sense. But this is a completely different alpha, and yet we're inheriting the same camera. It's just not really an appropriate camera for such a move. The camera being so much higher than the character means that... what does it mean? The place that you should really be aiming is going to be like above the person rather than directly at them. I mean, it's easier because of the big hitbox, but we shall continue this discussion later. The last note on the alpha is that range staggers aren't cool. It wasn't cool when Twice did it. It's not really cool when Compressed does it. And no, it's not cool when Hawks can do it. And it seems like for that reason, they gave him quite high down power on the alpha. Which, again, I don't really like down power distribution like this. And down power should really be in such a position where you want to keep it as low as possible, unless it's particularly abusable. I don't like that it's abusable, so I can understand why it is as high as it is. But both of these things, I don't think they should be this way. With all the cool things that this character can do, all the new features they have, all the new functions they have once they hit level 7, you would think that level distribution might be pretty even. You'd think, oh, this is a pretty expensive character. Not really, because Hawks' game plan was not actually that combo focused between all of his skills. You don't really need to use Alpha as your combo starter. The only thing that really matters here is Beta. This is actually just Beta, the character. This is the game plan. Beta. Beta. Sometimes Alpha. Sometimes Gamma. But only sometimes Gamma. And the reason why I say sometimes is because this move is also really inconsistent. Sometimes it will just completely knock them in the opposite direction. Sometimes it will knock them towards me. And as far as I can tell, it's just random. There might not be anything in the programming that makes it random. It could just be entirely based on spacing, but it feels really inconsistent practically. Previously, when we talked about Assault Endeavor, one of my critiques was to do with the level scaling of Beta. With Endeavor, whenever he uses his Beta, it does a bunch of small hits and then a final hit. And then as you add more levels to the move, small hits do a lot more damage. And this is consistent through most levels. I didn't like that because it was hard to balance, and in the case of Hawks, you have something very similar, where the initial slash always does the same amount of damage, but as you add more levels to it, the small hits after the slash start to do more damage. I think you're running into the same problem in that this is very difficult to properly balance, and sometimes the slashes don't really have anything to do with the main slash. You can miss the main slash and then hit the small slashes, or the movement of your character makes you walk into them. And finally, tracking, you know, it's just... I don't think this is a move that requires like any tracking, because it is mostly just like a get off me move. Like, there are ways you can combo into this so you don't actually need to have any sort of tracking to it. In fact, I encourage that sort of design, but tracking here is not the answer. You don't need it. And even if this would work, like even in a situation in which it makes sense to have tracking, it doesn't even work here because you're going too fast. Like, the whole tracking aspect is just kind of dumb. But what's new? Typical tracking L. I think that's gonna be the end of my main critique. While there are some obvious implementation problems, I think a lot of it is down to bad design. And there are ways that we could improve the design, and I would like to talk about that a bit in the potential section. Okay, so I've loaded back into the game and I've got some mods loaded. And I'd like to show you some of the changes I was able to make, and we can discuss some various other things. First of all, what you may notice is that I've changed the camera. I've liked changing the camera a little bit. I've been experimenting with that, trying to find the optimal positioning. So it is no longer placed directly above Hawks, it's now more traditional. And one of the things I've noticed while placing the camera in this way is that I really hate his animations. Like, my god, you don't need to have your wings out like this right now, Hawks. How about you actually use your feet sometimes? And maybe not cover up the center of the screen? Come on, man. Does this man even have any leg strength? Bro skips leg day every day. Especially if I want to zoom in, like you are not seeing anything like this. Ideally, if we are zooming in like this, just so we have that better camera orientation, I would add some transparency to the character, just so it isn't always obstructing view. But fortunately, it's not all that necessary for this character. At least when you're standing idle, he'll put his wings to the left side, which is not in the way of the crosshair. Unless he starts drinking something, and then they fly to the right. Some consistency, please. One side effect of this camera change is that if you were to fire a charge alpha directly downwards, it will no longer go in the predictable straight line, but that's fine, it's whatever. As for the actual changes, I have changed his tap alpha to be more of a traditional projectile. Like so, I've actually just copy pasted Afo's alpha. One thing I've noticed about this is that if you fire it like directly above someone's head, it will just destroy the projectile. I think this is to do with the implementation of the normal tornado, in which it would normally hit because of the hitbox size, vertical size being so long. But when I've taken that size away, it just disappears. There was also something that made it so that regardless of what this projectile is, as soon as it touches the ground, it transforms into a tornado. So I just had to replace the ground tornado entirely, so it basically doesn't exist anymore. I probably would like it if I could maintain height while flying around, maybe increase the animation speed enough. Best I can do really is using rapid cards. I'm pretty sure there's some people that know more about animation shenanigans. And so as I level up my alpha, the projectile changes as Afo's does. It's still more of a reasonable size. Maybe that's a bit big. I don't know, don't care. Moving on. But speaking of levels, given the way that Hawks' abilities improve as you level them up, it brings upon the discussion of how should level scaling really work in this game. So the way I would do it is level 1, 4, 7 are your checkpoint levels. So at each stage it represents something. Levels 1 through 3 represents function but not reliable. So an alpha that is probably hard to hit, has a small hitbox, maybe doesn't have enough ammo, and in the case of this Hawks, given that he has 2 beta ammo, I think this is more than he should really have at level 1. They at least did the right thing for the Gamma, where you do start with 1 ammo, and then as soon as you get to level 4, you get 2 ammo. And so level 4 is when your moves start to become more reliable. Not necessarily powerful, just more reliable. So I would say once you get to level 4, maybe then we can have 2 ammo. And of course you do get extra ammo whenever you level up Alpha as well. That is pretty commonplace. And then level 7 is when we start seeing the additional effects like Hawks already have, which is what brought upon this discussion. Where you get, you know, the triple tornado, the armored attack, and of course the bonus hit with the reveal. That's when it becomes powerful, but I would not suggest any additional functionalities beyond this. So hitting level 9 is simply about optimal power. If you're primarily using a skill for its utility and not for its capabilities, then I would say getting level 7 is all you really need. Don't worry too much beyond that. But if you want everything to be optimal, then level 9 is your play. So if a character is going to be very alpha oriented, I would say probably get that to level 9 because you want that to be optimal, as that is your primary ability. But in the case of Hawks, because if he wants to use all of his skills together to maximize his combos, then it might be a better idea to make sure that everything is about equal. But as it stands, I think that Beta is easily his most powerful skill, which is why I would probably just take that to level 9 straight away before even caring about anything else. Maybe get Alpha to level 7 just for the triple tornadoes, which is pretty good for KOing down players. Quick demonstration of that, by the way. Yeah, mostly because down players don't have any limitations on down power. You can do as much damage to them as you like. Now, Hawks, I would not say has a lot of implementation issues. I would say he has a lot of design issues aside from the beta bug. So for the remainder, I want to talk about ways that we could improve the design. So I'm mostly going to be talking about beta because I don't really like the design of beta all that much. If you hold down the button, you can delay its activation, but it doesn't really do anything. Like, I don't think the incentive makes sense to hold it. It would be extremely niche. In fact, when he first released, given that you could hold it, it made me think that there was maybe a charge functionality to it, similar to the alpha, which is exactly what I want to propose. Let's make it so that there are now 2 versions of beta. One is a tap version and one is a charge version. Where this version, the standard version of beta we have here, would become only the charge version. Whereas the tap version is simply the dash and nothing more. So it would feel something like Genji's Swift Strike in Overwatch. And a big part of that is being able to act out of it immediately, no longer having to wait for the rest of the move to complete before being able to move. Maybe then you can combo that into like an immediate gamma. But there's so much end lag, I can't do anything immediately after dashing. I think that would make his gameplay a bit more fun, giving you a few more options, because as I've said many times in the past, I really like it when your moves have multiple functionalities to them. I do think it's really good that there is a charged version of Alpha. I like that you can hold Gamma a bit, so let's give Beta that similar love. But let's also talk about how we can improve the charge mechanic a bit more. If I charge to Strike Kendo, listen to what happens when I charge Alpha. There's a little sound that plays when the charge is complete. But if you do that on Hawks, you don't really get that. You can't even hold it indefinitely. In fact, it's not necessarily obvious when you're doing the input for the charge as well. If I'm constantly fighting, I'm like firing out alphas or whatever, and I want to transition into a charge alpha, I'm currently holding down the button after that last animation. But because I press the button mid-animation, it's not queuing it up. I would like there to be a more obvious indication that it's actually listening to my input. Because if you start pressing the input while you're doing something else, nothing will happen. So that would just be a bit of a quality of life change. Maybe I do want to hold it a little bit longer, but I'll also propose a new mechanic, which is perfect timing variations. So if I let go of the button the immediate moment that the charge is complete, I get a slightly enhanced version, which could just mean a faster initial speed of the projectile. And for the case of beta, it could have something to do with animation speed. Maybe faster dash, maybe less end lag, something like that. Which could then lead into exclusive source of combos. But more importantly, I think it's just better for reacting to things very quickly. And it would have to be pretty precise timing as well. Do these sound like fun ideas? I would really like to try them. Unfortunately, modding capability, as far as I know, other people know about it better than I do, but I cannot show it off to you. But that's all I've got to offer. If you have any ideas as to what we could do to make Strike Hawks better, please let me know. And to close out this video, my overall review of Strike Hawks is that he's a good character, has some design flaws. Beta bug is like the main implementation issue. But overall, I really like this character a lot. Room for improvement is absolutely there. So for a tier list for design and implementation, I would put him mid to high B, definitely less than A, somewhere in the B range for sure, but not like right at the top of B. He might be higher B if the beta bug wasn't a thing, but I do like him. Do give him a chance. I think the character's fun, and I would love it if improvements could be made, especially the ones I described. But that's out of my hands, unless they hire me. Bandai, please, we can work together. I wouldn't mind a new job. But I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. I have a bit of time off, so it shouldn't be too long until the April video. I'm also running out of season. Blame my cold at the start of the season for that. And I'll see you in another video. Bye bye. Also, I stream sometimes.